G'day painters, we're still in the old world this week working on dwarfs. Today it's the one and only Queen Helga. Let's paint. As always, I start from a purple base for my dwarfs, and this purple is Diabolic Plum. I think I'm sticking with this purple from now on, but I've said that before, so who knows what I'll do in the future. The first colour is Dark Sky to block in her dress. When I first started my dwarfs, the red was meant to be the main colour, with blue being the secondary colour. Somewhere along the way I seem to have swapped that, and I'm not really sure when that happened. But it's not really a big deal, the models all obviously belong to the same army still anyway. The next colour is Desert Yellow for her hair. I feel like she deserves golden flowing locks, so Desert Yellow is a good base for us to build up from. I block all her skin in with Topaz Skin. Amazingly, I do actually change the skin recipe I use for her from my normal dwarf one, which you'll see later. I figured I should give you a warning so it doesn't come as too big a shock later. For the leathers, it's leather brown. This is just the strap on her axe hand, the pouch on the front, her boots, and her belt. With plate mail, I start blocking in the metals. For the chain mail, I'm doing an overbrush to leave the purple showing in the recesses. Then it's the axe blade and helmet. Originally I was planning on doing the chest armour as gold, but I changed my mind later and blocked the majority of it in with plate mail, so you can do that now too if you're following along at home. Then with hammered copper I block in all the gold parts. That's the filigree along the bottom of her dress, the buckles on her belt, the filigree on her helmet, and the filigree on her chest armour. This is where I changed the chest armour. I just blocked it all in with plate mail first, then redid the filigree with the hammered copper. It's way easier just to redo the filigree than it is to try dodge it all while blocking in the plate mail. This is a good example of how it's okay to change your mind midway through a paint job. You want to have a plan in mind for the model when you start, but don't be afraid to change your mind once you've got some colours on the model and you think something different will look better. With rough iron, I block in the handle for her axe. This has become my go-to for weapon handles lately. My dwarfs come from a hold high up in the mountains, so I feel like wood would be rare and not something that they would use for weapon handles. So I want them to be metal, but I wasn't liking how they look when they're the same metal as like the axe blades. So using rough iron gives a bit of contrast and they look better in my mind. To get some red on the model, I did the cuffs of her sleeve. This was another spot I changed my mind. In the original plan, these cuffs were going to be gold, but I think they look far better red and it lets me get a splash of red on her. I use Basilisk Red to block it in to give me a base to build from for my future reds. While I wait for the Basilisk Red to dry, I move to the horns. I block them in with Skeleton Bone, though I think it might have been good to start a bit darker to help the highlights pop more. Though you will see later that they do show up alright. I just think I would have liked a little bit more contrast. Now that the previous red is dry, I can go over it with Vampire Red. Vampire Red is the base colour for my red recipe, but it doesn't cover well, so I use Basilisk Red to give a nice base for me to build off of. Time for shading. The hair and skin gets a very thin down all over wash, while for the gold and the blue I do a normal wash. Then for the silver I just put the wash where I want the shadows. One of the things using a single colour for all my shadows on my dwarves has taught me is how you can get a lot of different effects from a single shade colour. Thinning it down differently and applying it differently really changes the way it works, and it's important for making sure lighter colours don't get washed out or discoloured too much, while you still get the shadows that you're looking for. Then it's time for the highlights, the fun part. I start on the blues first with deep blue. I work around the model picking out the parts that are facing upwards and any ridges that the light would be hitting. As always when I'm highlighting, I'm using very thin down paints and using a couple of layers to build up the highlights. This helps smoothen out the gradient and makes the highlights less stark. Then it's Ultramarine Blue for the final highlight, just working inside the previous step in smaller areas where the light would be the brightest. Then I followed the same steps for the reds, the first highlight being Dragon Red, then Pure Red to finish it off. Then I moved to the skin. For the first highlight I used Moonstone Skin. This is from the Rose Skin Tone Triad from Army Painter's Fanatic range. Helga is a special character and I want to give her a bit of extra attention. I thought starting from the normal base colour for my dwarf skin, but changing the highlight colours to a more rosy colour would help her stand out a little bit when she's next to her bodyguards. Plus I just wanted her to have more of a rosy skin tone. Keeping in line with all that, Barbarian Flesh is the final highlight for her skin. Barbarian Flesh is also from the Rose Skin Tone Triad. With Pure Red, I did a little bit of glazing on both her nose and her lips. The nose, I only did 2 layers of very thin glazes, just to give it a hint of a rosy nose. Her lips I did more layers to give her lips more of a red tone. Since I like doing things in the wrong order, I block in her eyes with white now. I would recommend doing this before doing the skin highlights, that way you can fix any mistakes. Thankfully, I didn't make any mistakes. Yay for me. Next, it's time to work on her hair. Something I've noticed with these metal models is the hairs are very fine, which looks great for the model, but makes it really hard to highlight each hair individually. So instead I'm using the side of my brush and running it along the hair to pick out the raised parts. I'm focusing towards the parts facing upwards that'll be getting the most light, same as always. Then the final highlight is a 50-50 mix of Daemonic Yellow and Ice Yellow. I'm really happy with how her hair looks. You obviously don't want to go pure yellow for blonde hair, it doesn't look right, but having a more browny, tanny yellow as the base, then washing out the yellow a bit for the final highlight, I think it makes it read less as yellow and gives that golden locks look that I was looking for. Then the highlight for the leather parts is a 50-50 mix of leather brown and ice yellow. While I do that, why don't you give the video a like? And if you want to see more content from me, hit that subscribe button. According to YouTube, less than 10% of my viewers are subscribed, so if you're one of those 90% that aren't and you enjoy my content, then help me out and hit that subscribe button. Time to highlight the horns. Starting with Boney Spikes, I start highlighting from around 2/3 of the way down the horns. Then with pale sand, it's just the tip of the horns, roughly around the top quarter of them. Time to highlight the metals. I start by highlighting the silvers with Mithril. I also use this to do the buckles on the satchel and the wrist strap. I hadn't done them previously because I knew I'd mess them up while painting the leather, and I could do them now instead and make my life easier. Then it's greedy gold to finish the golds, as always picking out the parts facing upwards that would be picking up the most light. Helga has 3 gems on her, 1 on her helm and 2 on her belt. I decided to just do all 3 of them the same colour to save some time, but you could definitely do them different colours if you wanted to get a splash of a few more colours in there. I decided to go with turquoise for these gems, so the first colour was Hydra Turquoise to block in the bottom 2/3 of the gems. Then Marine Mist to block in the bottom 1/3 of the gems. And finally white to do a tiny dot at the top of the gems and a slightly larger dot at the bottom. I've been doing the glowing runes for my dwarfs as red, but I decided to help Helga stand out a bit better, I'd do hers blues. Honestly, I'm not totally sold on this and I'm debating going back and changing them to red. I've decided to leave them for a while and see how I feel about it once I've given it some time. The steps are the same as I've done for the runes on my other dwarfs, just with blues instead of reds. So a lighter colour is the first step, then a darker colour like crystal blue in the middle of the runes. Then the darkest colour, in this case that's Imperial Navy for the very centre of the runes. Now I got this Helga second hand and she didn't come with her shield. So I went through my dwarf bits to find a shield that would fit her best and settled on a dwarf warrior shield. So I painted that up. You probably don't need me to spend much time on this, so let's just speed through it. Basilisk Red is the base. Vampire Red to start the reds. Highlights of Dragon Red. Then Pure Red. Plate mail on the inside of the shield. Hammered copper for the edge of the shield and the design on the front. Purple tone for shadows. Greedy gold to highlight the golds. And now the shield's finished, you hold the shield next to her and question everything. I don't think I like the shield on her. I think it's slightly too big and something about it doesn't look right. I've decided to leave it off for now and see if I can find a better shield. To be honest, I like her without the shield anyway. But what do you guys think? Do you like her with the shield? Do you like her without the shield? Why don't you let me know in the comments? Queen Helga is such a classic model. I remember having her over 2 decades ago as one of the heroes in my dwarf army as a kid. To get her on the table painted up well would make kid me so happy. If you've seen my shield bearers video, you'll also know she's magnetised to sit on my shield bearers. I look forward to building an army where my queen on shield bearers leads the army to stomp some enemies. I do need to make a decision on the runes and the shield, so I'm not sure we can really say she's finished, but she's definitely ready for the table at least. Let me know in the comments your opinions on the rune and the shield, and since you've lasted this long you must have enjoyed the video, so give it a like too. Might as well subscribe while you're down there. Thanks for watching, catch you in the next video.